So I decided to try something new here, and I'm in the process of making this little Toolmakers vise, and I figured I wouldn't mind trying some scraping. So first thing I do is get some Persian blue, and I'm going to mix that about 50-50 with some whey oil, just to make it go a little farther and not be so gummy on the steel. Once I get this mixed, I'm just going to take the parts and I'm only doing the scraping on where the parts actually meet with each other. I'm definitely not scraping everything on there that doesn't need to be. So just a matter of getting this mixed and then putting it on those pieces and then throwing it in the vise with a towel sitting in the vise to not mar up the material any and grab a scraper and get to it. So taking it off, you can see there's just where the blue's touching the high spots on there. And it's just going to be a matter of putting in that vise and scraping until the blue is gone, then replacing it down into the Persian blue mixed and getting it to blue again. And hopefully each time that happens, the blue covers up more and more of the area that's being scraped until it's completely covered, at which time it's probably pretty close to as flat as you're going to get it. Um, this procedure doesn't really take off a lot of material. It's more like just rubbing it flat, and tiny little specks of material are coming off. So in the grand scheme of things, it's really not. It's not like taking an angle grinder or anything to this. Um, so the pieces that are going to get done, the stationary piece on the back of the vise, it actually gets press fit onto the vise and does not move at all. But I'd like to get, the nicest fit I can on there. So I'd be doing that part of it and also the front part of the vise where it will be moving up and down the base of the vise. And of course, the base itself has the two grooves, one on each side, that meets with these top pieces, and that will get done as well. The remainder of everything else, I'm just going to take it over to the sander and get it as flat as possible on that sander, and afterwards just continue to take it down and grit till maybe I get about 320, 400 grit, and then just polish it up with some metal polish. Some of this stuff I might avoid polishing and put some blue in on it to give it some contrast, just for looks. It's not going to make, well, I guess where the bluing goes on it, probably going to be a little more rust preventive, but I don't think this stuff I'm working with ain't right here rust whatsoever. Um, so I'm not overly worried about rust prevention on this thing. The pieces here, the smaller pieces worked out really nice. At this point, I'm just taking this scraper, and there's this isn't the Persian blue on there that's getting scraped off. But it does come off very nicely. Maybe a tiny little bit of metal is coming off as well with it. However, it's not at the point where I'm actually going to scrape this whole top thing here. It's just the grooves pretty much that I'm concerned about where the pieces are mating on the tops and sides, and that where it's not important, it will be put on the sander just to flatten out as best as possible. However, at the same time, thinking about it, maybe after it's all polished and everything, I might go back with a scraper and just, put those scraping marks in just to, you know, have that look to it. But on the other side, it's not the end of the world if they're not in there. So again, with this piece and every other, it goes into that Persian blue, and you can see there's just a little bit of lines at this point that are high, so those have to come down. And back and forth between the Persian blue and putting in that vise to scrape a little flat. And after the scraping was done, the next stage here is on a lot of these parts just to run them on the sander and get them as flat as possible. If I had a surface grinder, I'd obviously be using the surface grinder at this point, but The one I was looking at was like $14,000, and right now I got some major expenses in my shop that have to be paid for well before, buying a luxury item like a surface grinder. As far as using a belt here to sand this stuff, I spent decades actually using belt sanders on wood, and when you get to the point where you can take a nice big 3 4 inch or 3 4 foot piece of wood and get it pretty close to flat, it's not that hard to transfer that skill into getting metal a little flat. Now you'll see here pretty quickly, I actually shows where this is taking the material off and where it is not. If you look there, you can see, difference in contrast between the edges and the center. Here's a better shot where obviously, the center is not making contact with that sandpaper yet, but the edges definitely are. So it's just, and that's the bottom. It's just a matter of going back and here's another shot as, a little bit more has come off, and you can see in the center there that it's actually now just a little bit on each end in the middles that's still low. This, the way it is right now, would melt perfectly fine on on a bench, but I did continue to take it down a little bit, but it has to cool. So as it's doing that, I get this little air rasp, I guess you'd call it, and it's just to clean up this center here. This is going to get scraped as well, but I'm just trying to make it a little flatter before I go in there and start scraping. And the one part about scraping these, you cannot, at least I could not, get that Persian blue in there with there being lips on each side. So it's just a matter of, rubbing them back and forth as best as possible and trying to make sure it's as flat as possible in there as well. Now you can look here that the last piece of the base there is done. There's a little about 3 or 4 marks in the center there that are still low, but that doesn't matter. They're going to get hogged out anyways. And once I ran over the with the belt sander to make pieces down to about 120 grit on that belt and as smooth as possible and flat as possible. Then it's just a matter of going to the orbital sander here and starting to sand out the scratch marks from the belt. And those 120 grit scratch marks, you pretty much need like about 80 grit on the orbital sander even to put a dent in them to pull them up. So, it's 80 grit, then 100 grit. Then I think I finished off at 120 grit. And here's the reason why I'm doing metal prep before the actual milling is complete. I was using my milling machine with a 3/8 carbide bit to hog out a lot of material in the center there, as at the time I had most of my end mills down to get sharpened. By the time I was on the 6th hole, the motor, unbeknownst to me, was just too hot to even hold on to or to touch. When I took the shroud off the motor, it was just cooking, and needless to say, it caused some major damage to that motor. To the point where I've taken it into the shops, and they pretty much say there's not much they can really do about it, and if there is something they can do about it, it would be a lot of money to fix that thing. And currently, I'm waiting to hear back from the manufacturer and also the Canadian sales branch for that company to see about getting a new motor for that thing. Currently, my plan is to get this thing back up and running. And when I do, I want to put it up for sale. I got about $5,000 into this milling machine. By the time you take the price of the machine, plus, that Priest tool sketch for the Z-axis. And if I could get $2,500, I think I'd be rather happy than my plan is to actually go get an email. Unfortunately, a full-size Bridgeport knee mill just will not fit in the area I want it to fit in. So the next option is get one, that weighs about 1,500 pounds, 1,400 pounds. That's, almost as big as the normal size, or at least what it seems to be the normal size Bridgeports to me, with about a 49, 50-inch deck on them. However, for now, that's just wishful thinking. I did have a bunch of money put away for getting a 5-axis CNC milling machine, but it's way more important to me to actually have a conventional milling machine in my shop than not. And besides that, with getting an email, I'll get a lot more experience on running an email. So, I'll have that going forward as well, instead of just working on that milling machine I have. And it's a good milling machine. It's just not designed, for the amount of hours continuously that I got put into that thing. Um, I'm hoping someone, locally wants to buy it, but if not, I'm fine, at some point just put it into storage too. But the main thing is to get a motor. And you can see on the center there's a little dab of blue, and that's actually plastics or whatever it is that is actually melted when that thing got super hot. I did end up going in and chipping it off, and I thought that's what the problem was that melted in there. But I had electricians tell me that no, it was the wiring around the outside there that was pretty much cooked. And they're showing me like how thin the plastic between the core and the wiring was, and some was good, some was bad, some was burnt. Needless to say, I really do need a motor for this to get this thing back up and running, and I'll stay for a little bit longer and actually pick up an email. When I was actually taping this, the camera did eventually run out of juice, and it was more important to me to get this thing back together and see if I could get it working again than sitting around waiting for a battery to charge on that camera. So this project to put this back together abruptly ends pretty soon here with what looks like a motor that's not completed. But I did get it back together. When I hooked it back up, I put it into forward motion, and it moved just a tiny little bit. I switched it into reverse, and when I put it in reverse, it probably moved about 6 full rotations, and then it just all of a sudden stopped and sparked. Um, so I'm pretty much determined that this thing's never going to run again. And there's no part numbers on it or anything like that, so it's next to impossible to go online. I don't know, maybe taking a picture of it and doing a picture recognition might find something online, but what I've been doing to date so far, I just haven't seen anything that even looks like this. So I'm up to the mercy here pretty much of the manufacturer. And I have phoned other